They had an electric game during the bowl season that a lot of people watched. BYU and Colorado now actually battle as members of the Big 12 Conference. This is a Locked On Cougars and Locked On Buffs crossover.
You are Locked On College Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into Locked On Cougars and Locked On Buffs. I'm host of Locked On Cougars, Jay Catch. That across from me digitally is Kevin Borba, host of Locked On Buffs. We are your daily podcast covering the BYU Cougars and Colorado Buffaloes, respectively. A big thank you to all of you for making them your first listen and or view of the day. And as always, thank you to the Locked On Podcast Network for allowing us to do what we do on a daily basis. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Moz. We like to say move and be moved. All right, Kevin, today we're going to preview BYU and Colorado. It's BYU's Big 12 opener, Colorado's second game of their Big 12 slate, but a big matchup all the same. We'll get into the nitty-gritty of what we expect from that game. I need to talk about a unique relationship. Coach Prime and Kalani Sitake, they make no bones about the fact that they absolutely adore one another, and I use that term very adroitly, it feels like, because they do like each other. And then we'll also obviously predict what we're expecting on Saturday night. So, Kevin, right out of the chute, the Colorado Buffaloes, do they have a quarterback? Because Cody Rourke of Locked On Broncos tweeted out Saturday night that there is not a viable quarterback on the Buffaloes roster.
I think they have a quarterback. His name is Caden Salter. I understand where he's coming from. I think the more accurate sort of description of Colorado's quarterback situation is they had a very bad quarterback plan. And I've talked about this on my show for like the whole season now because it's been happening every week. Colorado pressed the panic button after the Georgia Tech game, right? Georgia Tech ended up being really good. They're, I think, number 18 or 17 right now. And they lost that game, probably should have won. They had a lot of moments where they could have scored but didn't. And then against Delaware, they played three quarterbacks. And I vehemently disagreed with that sort of method. But I said on my show countless times, if you're going to do this thing where it's like an open competition, you have to go with the guy who played the best. And that was Ryan Staub. And then Ryan Staub struggled against Houston. And then it was like, okay, now what do? We go back to Salter. And I think they just sort of played their cards wrong. I think they should have just let Salter figure things out. And he's obviously the answer. The offense moves with him. One of the wide receivers, Joseph Williams, tweeted something along the lines of like, he has all 10 of them with him on his side or whatever. So it's clearly the locker room likes him too. I just think Colorado, Coach Prime didn't handle the quarterback situation as well as they should have.
Now, I'll let you. I'm sure you got questions about BYU, but I got one other one on that front. With regards to replacing Shedeur Sanders, the offense inevitably is going to change because Shedeur was not a dual threat quarterback, but BYU has seen Caden Salter before. When he was at Liberty, BYU went out and played at Liberty, albeit Caden Salter got injured just before that game was played, so they never actually faced him, but they were very clearly aware of his dual threat capability. How much has this Colorado offense changed with him under center versus the previous edition that BYU fans are familiar with Shedeur Sanders?
Yeah, I mean, it's changed week to week, so you can only imagine how it's changed from Shedeur Sanders to Caden Salter. I think with Shedeur Sanders not being here, there's like this cloud that hangs over Colorado where it's like, hey, we actually have to scheme things differently because he's not going to just save us, right? Although he wasn't like this. He wasn't Michael Vick by any means or Josh Allen where he's just running people over. He was very mobile in the pocket, right? He was very good at keeping stuff alive, sometimes to a fault where he would just sort of keep retreating backwards. But Shedeur Sanders was excellent at keeping plays alive and sort of making the perfect throws. I don't think people gave him enough credit, but he is statistically the most accurate quarterback in college football history. Completed like 74% of his or 71% of his passes over the course of his career, something like that. And so holds the record for that over the course of his career. But with Caden Salter, there's this new element of like running the ball. And Colorado, that's relatively new to them. They did not run the ball at all last year or the year before. They actually ranked dead last in running the past 2 years. And so they are more reliant on the run game. And they also have like this Coach Prime's main critique of Caden Salter after the Georgia Tech game was like, he didn't run when he needed to. Like, that's why they brought him in, because he's such a dynamic guy where it's like, use your legs, please.
Okay, so and also on that front, Pat Shurmur, obviously, he's a well-respected coach. He's been around the game for a really, really long time. But going back to the Alamo Bowl this past year, BYU pretty effectively shut down Colorado. And how much carryover do you anticipate as they go into this game now, this time at Folsom Field versus being played in San Antonio?
I'm not going to pretend like BYU is not good. I'm not going to do it. Like, I think there's going to be carryover and a little bit, right? There's going to be a tad, but if you look at this Colorado offense, there's compared to that BYU game, there's probably 9 new starters, right? So it's a completely different team. They're running a different offense. Pat Shurmur is actually, which he's sort of been on the hot seat these days, but that Wyoming game got him off of it. But he's a guy that he has to get creative, right? You can't just rely on Caden Salter to drop back and pick apart a defense because that's not his game, right? That was Shador's game, and you did a great job of stopping it. I remember, and I'm sure you guys saw the video, Shador mid-game with the little iPad where he's like, I don't know what they're doing. Like, I do not understand what they're doing. Like, you never want to hear that, right? That's like the worst thing to hear, worst thing to fear as a quarterback, where it's just like, I don't understand. And so I think BYU's defense will probably try to confuse Caden Salter, but it'll be a different offense. And I think that's fair to assume.
Well, I can tell Buffs fans that Shador's not the only one. Earlier this year, I'm thinking Frank Reich, this interim Stanford head coach,
Right.
His weekly press conference, Kevin, he got up there and said that BYU's coverages essentially made no sense to him because they disguised them so well that even him as a former NFL quarterback, NFL coach, he had a hard time diagnosing it. And that, I think it's a credit to Jay Hill as BYU's defensive coordinator and what he's been able to field. Now, looking at this, BYU makes a trek that they have not made in decades as they head to
talk about that.
It's been a minute since the Cougars and the Buffs have played as league foes. Funny enough, I said 1981 was the last time BYU played at Folsom Field. Do you know the last time that Colorado played in Provo, Utah? It goes back a long way.
By the gauging of this question, I want to say like 1915 or something crazy.
Well, a little bit soon. 1946.
Okay.
So we're in the
World War II times, right?
Exactly, yes. So it's been a minute since these two have played, albeit they're relatively geographic proximity. They just have not played a lot over the decades. But this is a rivalry I think that could kick up. I think coming off that Alamo Bowl game, Colorado wants nothing more than to get some payback against the Cougars. And I'm sure BYU's thinking, you know what? No, you're going to continue to be our proverbial little brother here.
Yeah, and I wanted to talk. One, obviously, that's very fascinating that they're probably a 1 hour plane flight away from each other and never play each other. That's interesting in and of itself. But the thing that interests me the most is your quarterback situation, right? And I covered Stanford, so I was familiar with Barrett Bachmeier. I was there for like the Tim Tebow comps, right? He had the Tim Tebow comparisons as a high schooler. Him and his brother were one of the most dynamic duos, and his brother's on the team actually, Tiger. You guys know this, but for my Colorado people, they were one of the most dynamic duos in the state of California, right? They were lighting it up. And I really thought, Jake, because he showed up, what was it, spring or not spring ball? Yeah, spring ball, summer ball. No,
he showed up,
spring ball, fall camp, excuse me.
He showed up in June, Kevin.
Right.
He showed up in June for summer term. And by the
he played spring ball at Stanford.
Yeah, exactly.
But talk to me about how he's looked, because I thought there'd be a little growing pain where it's like, oh, this dude's been here for a month and a half, and now we're asking him to start for a team that was a playoff contender last year, if you really want to get real about it.
Well, that's the thing about this. He's been nothing short of remarkable, because considering how short a time he has been in Provo, I said he showed up in late June. He had essentially 4, maybe 5 weeks to learn the playbook. Training camp started. He battled 2 other guys who had well over a year in the system and beat them both out for the job. And so far, he has 0 turnovers. He has a career high in passing yards from this past game. And if you go back, if you're a Colorado Buffaloes fan, go watch the second half of the Eastern Carolina game. Maybe you watch the full game. Watch the comparison of him in the first half versus the second half. It felt like a coming-of-age moment in a way, as he really started to step into throws, started putting stuff on guys, and really started looking more like a true quarterback, whereas before that, it may have been more of he's an athlete playing quarterback, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's where the Tebow comparisons come from, just because he's a big dude. And Colorado fans, let me warn you, he's going to be wearing number 47. It's going to be jarring. I'm sure it was jarring for Jake at first as well. It was as soon as I saw him commit to Stanford, I remember writing the article, and I was like, that's odd. He's wearing number 47 in his commitment picture. Surely that's not going to stick. It did. It did, of course. And so the other thing that really caught my attention, because we've talked enough about the defense. Your defense is really good. Obviously, they pride themselves on confusing everyone, and they get to the quarterback and they do all the right things. I want to go back to the offense. And although I'm a big Chase Roberts guy, I think your best weapon, and I want you to talk about him more. Another Stanford connection, actually, LJ Martin. He's the one that concerns me the most for Colorado because they struggle to stop the run. Right, Colorado has not been able to, for whatever reason, the rushing attacks have gotten them pretty well this year. And so, talk to me about LJ Martin.
So here's the thing about this. LJ, it was a 4-star prospect out of El Paso, Texas. You talk about a Stanford connection. He was committed to Stanford. David Shaw stepped down, and BYU, as soon as David Shaw stepped down, he reopened his commitment as a recruitment, and BYU got in and got him. The LJ Martin that Buffs fans are going to see Saturday night is a fulfillment of multiple years. He's in his 3rd year now at BYU of what they've been expecting to see for a long time. Injuries have kind of slowed him down the first 2 years, and it happens. It's college football. He's a running back. That's just part of the game. But he has 300-yard games already this season. In his career to this point, Kevin, he had 2. So he has absolutely emerged as the bell cow, the lead power back that BYU has been hoping for quite some time. And something I talked about on my show, you talk about the fact that the Buffs have struggled to stop the run. Looking at the stats, 2 Power 5 opponents that Colorado's played, they have 320 yards to the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets, 209 yards to the Houston Cougars. BYU right now averaging 265.7 yards rushing per game through the first 3 games.
Is that
bad? It's bad for Colorado. It's good for BYU. And I think you're going to see a steady dose of LJ Ware's number 4, him and number 30, Sione Moa. That power, lightning and thunder combo, I expect to see a lot of it Saturday night.
Yeah, and like the stat, which, I mean, you could pick apart stats all the time, but those two are averaging 8.6 yards per carry and 5.3 yards per carry. So it's pretty much, you hand the ball off to LJ Martin, he's pretty much going to give you a first down, or at least close to it. And then Moa is like the downgrade or the backup, if you will, and he's giving you 5 yards per carry, right? It's like, okay, that's a little scary, right? And I don't know. I think the problem with Colorado's defense is I don't think they really know what the fix is. They've sort of have stuck to this man coverage thing, and where it's like, we are going to play man because Colorado likes their odds, right? The DJ McKinney is a corner who's getting 1st round nods. They have some other good corners in that mix as well, but when you play man-to-man, it leaves you at risk for teams just running the ball down your throat because it's like, okay, cool. We're just going to run the ball and everyone's going to have their backs to us, right? And so it makes it a little bit difficult to load up the box. But I think my final question before we move on, Jake, is sort of talk to me about how you've seen the identity of this BYU team evolve, right? Because I think at first they played a little, I won't say scared with Bear, but they weren't like, okay, go do it. Like, go do the damn thing, right? It wasn't that. Like, talk to me about how you've seen it change.
No, they were careful with, and there's no doubt about that. And I think the one thing that they were wary of, and something that Kalani Sitake learned from Kyle Whittingham and all his years working at Utah, is turnovers. They are of paramount importance to Kalani Sitake, taking care of the football. And I think they were concerned. Bear Bachmeier made BYU history as the first true freshman in BYU football history. 101 seasons of BYU football. They've never had a true freshman start the season opener, and that's what he did when they took on Portland State. Well, with youth at the quarterback position, usually that comes with inexperience and turnovers. I think they were very wary of putting him in predicaments where he would turn over the football and thereby hurt this football program. But I think through the first 3 games, even though the level of opposition, Portland State, Stanford, and East Carolina, is not top tier, Kevin, he's taken care of the football. He's proven himself to be able to run everything that BYU wants to run. I'll just give you a quick example. Saturday night, the final touchdown that BYU scored is an LJ Martin 41-yard touchdown run. Aaron Roderick said in media availability that he had called 3 different plays that he gave to Bear to look and check on. He said, I have never given a freshman in all my years as an offensive coordinator 3 options on the play. What Bear did is he walked up to the line, LJ and him looked at it, they checked to the play, and LJ scored a 41-yard touchdown run because they saw what they needed to do. That shows what this young man is capable of. He is wise beyond his years. He understands the game at a very deep level, and so far, so good. So, yeah, the evolution has been that they were careful to make sure that they didn't load his plate too much, but he has proven very capable of taking on, I think, far more than they expected. So they've essentially thrown the playbook wide open or saying, all right, let's go do the thing.
Yeah. And I think that's sort of a testament to how smart he is. Like he and mature. Like you talked about that to check to a run play as a freshman quarterback when I'm sure there was a passing option in there.
Yeah. Well, and by the way, this family's smart. His older brother, Tiger, who's on the roster at wide receiver, was the number 19. Guys, he graduated from Stanford with a computer science degree in 2.5 years. That's just, it boggles my mind, the fact that he pulled that off. All right. So Kevin and I are going to talk more about the stakes of what this game means for these two programs, albeit Colorado's already played a Big 12 game this season. BYU opens Big 12 play, and both of them, I think, have aspirations of climbing near the top of the Big 12 conference. We're going to get into that next as we roll on this crossover edition of Locked On Cougars and Locked On Buffs. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at DoorDash. Now, it's almost the weekend. It's time to look back and crown this week's MVP on Who Delivered, powered by our friends at DoorDash. Just like you can win every Saturday with DoorDash Streaks, saving you more every time you order. These players deliver when it mattered most. Let's break it down. Now, on the Colorado side of things, we're giving it to Kaden Salter. Had a phenomenal performance, 300-plus yards against Wyoming. Really emerged, I think, is legit QB1 in Boulder. I'm also going to flip it over to the quarterback for BYU, Bear Bachmeier. Career high in passing yards, very much looked the part in a win over ECU. When the pressure was on, they both came through, no hesitation, no delay. I've been watching week to week. Their performances, well, they engender a lot of confidence, and that's the best part about this. It's on a streak. And just like both Kaden Salter and Bear Bachmeier delivered for BYU and Colorado, DoorDash delivers on your Saturdays. With DoorDash Streaks, you save every Saturday that you order. Stack it up all season long. You save up to $250, including $100 in DoorDash credits. Order this Saturday, keep the streak alive through your game day, and do it only with DoorDash. Terms apply. The promo period runs through 11/18. Today's show is also brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Now, the NFL season is here, everybody, and obviously we're having a lot of fun watching it. They have a fantastic offer for you as a new customer. Bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. The best part about FanDuel, it fits however you want to bet. Player props, over-unders, futures, no matter what you're into, or even jumping in on live action, they can do it all. The best part is it makes every game more exciting, whether you're watching your team or just keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup on a Sunday. It adds just a little extra to your Sundays on the couch. Are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. Cash in to get that $300 bonus, all courtesy of your friends over at FanDuel. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars and Locked On Buffs your first listen of the day. Hope you all are doing fantastic out there. Jake Hatch, Kevin Borba, breaking things down. Now, Kevin, we are looking at this as a matchup between these two programs, as two programs who coming into the season, probably didn't necessarily have aspirations of winning the Big 12, but you know what? It's still young enough on the season that they can harbor those ambitions, even if they maybe didn't say it out loud.
Yeah, I think in the Big 12, the only for certainty we have right now is that Texas Tech is good. And is that shocking? They spent $28 million on their roster, possibly more. So that shouldn't shock anyone. I think after that, every other team is vulnerable. And I sort of, going back to my days with the Pac-12, that was sort of the conference's problem when it came to the bigger picture of things. But that's what makes it fun, right? That's what makes a team like Colorado, who they've already lost a game, they're still very much in the thick of it, right? They beat BYU, they beat whoever else. They are very much in the race. And so I think this game offers hope. I think this game offers, for Colorado, it offers a statement game. It could be a statement game, right? Because BYU, and I'll let Jake elaborate on this later, they haven't played anyone, right? Portland State, very solid program. One of my buddies played there back in the day, but not right now. But they're G1 athletes, Jake. Yeah. But Stanford is, I mean, I still think Stanford, and this is like a random rant, but I still think Stanford's feeling that the aftershock of David Shaw stepping down. That program was not ready for anything to change, let alone try to dive into the landscape of where college football is. So they're struggling. They have a temporary coach. And then you've also played East Carolina, They are the best team you've played thus far. So you guys are about to be tested. Colorado is looking to beat a team that's ranked, right? That's a statement win. You guys are currently viewed as the best team in the ESPN FPI in the Big 12. Like, it is a big deal to beat a ranked team, regardless of the fact that they haven't played anyone. So Jake, what does this win mean to BYU?
Well, here's the thing. BYU has been using a phrase all training camp long. I think early on in the season, they want to go from what they called being good to great. They came so close to playing in the Big 12 title game last year. And had they not screwed it up against Kansas, or had they pulled off the comeback they were on against Arizona State, yeah, they're playing in Arlington. And trust me, Cougar fans, they haven't forgotten that. And I think the team hasn't forgotten it either, because they said they want to go from good to great. Well, what that means is they have aspirations of playing in the Big 12 title game this year and having that chance to go to the college football playoff. Well, step one in that direction, it's the Colorado Buffaloes. And Aaron Roderick, he was very clear. He said, this is going to be the best team we have played so far when he talked to the media earlier this week, because he was adamant in saying that Colorado's got the best athletes. They've got, as he liked to say about Deion Sanders, he runs an old school football program who, if you let them beat you up, they're going to beat you up. And BYU, yeah, they had a really, really impressive win against Colorado in that Alamo Bowl, but they, I think, fully understand that that's a one-off in many respects. This is a whole different deal. You're going to Folsom. You're going to the home of the Colorado Buffaloes. It's going to be a hostile environment. And yes, yet again, it's a true freshman quarterback making his second career road start. I think that the stakes are pretty darn high for the Cougs.
Yeah, let's peel back the onion a little bit in a way that's probably a little uncomfortable, in the sense of like, let's talk about what each team could do. Like what Colorado, like you'll have to tell me what Colorado could do to win. I'll do vice versa. Because I think for BYU, it's obvious. You win the game by running the ball. You establish the run, and you control the time of possession, right? Houston, I don't know if BYU fans watched that game, but Houston had the ball in the third quarter for, I think it was almost 13 minutes, right? For a total. So they had 2 drives that went about 13 minutes, and Colorado could not get off the field. And it was just constant runs down your throat. It was constant, like little jet sweeps to keep you on your toes. And I think Colorado really needs to figure out a way to get off the field. And that's sort of been their issue. Jake, for Colorado to win this game, because in a way I do see BYU is vulnerable. And the only reason I say that is because they haven't played anyone, and I'm sure this will get clipped and it's going to stop at vulnerable. But how could Colorado beat BYU? What is the blueprint?
I'm going to give you a stat that was thrown out. They have a thing called Coordinator's Corner here in Provo, where Greg Wrubell, the play-by-play voice, he has BYU's coordinators on each week to talk BYU football. And this was brought up with Jay Hill, who's the associate head coach as well as defensive coordinator. So, Kevin, in the 10 years that Kalani Sitake now has been the head coach of BYU, when BYU has 0 turnovers in a game, they are 34-4. When they are +1 in the margin, they're 43-8. That's 90+% of the time. If they either don't turn the ball over or are plus in the margin, they're going to win a whole lot more than they're going to lose. So I'm telling you right now, if Colorado wants to win this football game, they've got to force a guy like Bear Bachmeier into mistakes, pick him off, strip sacks, make LJ Martin or somebody fumble the football, take it away and cash those in for points. The turnover margin gets talked about so often about how much of a difference maker it is in games, but it's clear. The stats do not lie. You take care of the football, you're going to win a whole lot of football games. And that's the one thing I think Colorado needs to take advantage of. The other thing I will say for the Colorado offense, BYU struggled in the second half against East Carolina getting off the field on third downs. We're talking 3rd and 10s, 3rd and 14s. ECU found an opportunity, and they started exploiting kind of the middle part of the field in that intermediate passing area. So we're talking like the 10 to 20 yard range. They found holes in BYU zone and exploited that. I'm sure BYU saw it on film. They'll be working on shoring it up, but you've got to stay on the field. If you can grind out some drives, speaking of Colorado, and cash those in for touchdowns, keep that BYU offense on the sideline. And much like Texas Tech did to Utah, we talked about Tech being the favorites in the Big 12. They wore out Utah's defense. Colorado's got to stay on the field and wear out BYU's defense, much like that, if they want to win this football game.
Yeah, and that's a great point, because Colorado, in the games that they've struggled this year, they have had too many drives where it's like literally 3 plays and out. Like it is just pass, now we're punting, or pass, run, now we're punting, right? And Colorado cannot have that. Caden Salter, and he found it against Wyoming, and I think it'll be interesting to see how BYU defends this, because I would also say, aside from the fact that this is the best team BYU's played, I would say he's the most mobile quarterback that BYU has played. He is at his best, one of the best dual threat quarterbacks in the country. We haven't seen him at his best consistently at Colorado, and maybe even dating back to 2023. But when he gets it going, there was a play last week where, and this was a common issue against Georgia Tech, he'd scramble out and his receivers, they just weren't on the same page. And so there's an overthrow, underthrow here, or like he's pointing, but the guy's not going. Connected with Sincere Brown, who got clocked at like 22 miles per hour, running in the touchdown. Like if he can make those off script plays in BYU, or BYU can't stop him from getting off script and like making his life hard, it'll be a long day.
Well, and that's the thing. BYU's pass rush has got to get home. Jack Kelly's off to a really good start this year, but he's a linebacker. BYU needs defensive pressure from their defensive line. It's been the hallmark of what BYU lacks on defense under Kalani Sitake is the ability for defensive ends, defensive tackles, and the like to get pressure with 3- and 4-man fronts. And a program, an opportunity, I guess I should say, like Colorado, should allow them hopefully to do just that. If they don't, Caden Salter, if he gets outside the pocket, scramble drills are no good for anybody on defense because it's mentioned, it creates all kinds of havoc out there. And that's what BYU has to avoid. So I'm with you on that. Caden Salter, they got to keep him contained if they want to win.
And I will say, much improved Colorado offensive line this year. This is the best offensive line Coach Prime's had. Jordan Seaton leads all offensive tackles in pass blocking, right? Yeah. So this is a much better offensive line. But even it's like if you're a Colorado fan, you have to take some sort of like pride in like, hey, the offensive line is better. And even when the team gets to the quarterback, like Caden Salter is going to escape. So we're not going to have the task on anyone.
So we're not going to have, because Cash Cleveland was the center last year for Colorado. He's now at Texas Tech, if I recall correctly. Yeah. During that Alamo Bowl, I was there in San Antonio. There was I don't remember what play it was, but Cash Cleveland was so fed up with the inability to block BYU defensively. He threw his hands up in the air and like turned around and you could tell he was so fed up with it. So that should be better news that you maybe won't see that this time when BYU and Colorado square off. We'll see how it all shakes out. But coming up next, I want to talk about an unlikely bromance that seems to be budding on both sides of the Rockies here, Kevin. Kalani Sitake and Coach Prime. It's an interesting dynamic, and we'll get into that. We'll also have our predictions for the game. We'll get to that next right here on this crossover edition of Locked On Cougars and Locked On Buffs. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Mazda. For those who believe it's not just about playing the game, it's about redefining it. There are the moments that do more than put points on the board. They move crowds, move culture, and keep moving the game forward. And this week's moments that moved the game forward were both Caden Salter emerging as, once again, the QB1 for the Colorado Buffaloes against Wyoming. But also, I thought what we saw, the coming of age moment for Bear Bachmeier at BYU against ECU, those are the moments that are going to stand out to both of our fan bases this week. And the best part is they continue to move forward. The hope is that both of these quarterbacks start to shine and lead their programs to respective glory. But when you follow what moves you, the unexpected is only the beginning. And just like there's more to every highlight, there's more to a Mazda vehicle. It's all courtesy of your friends over at Mazda, where they like to say, move and be moved. Locked On Cougars, a Locked On Buffs crossover here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Jake Hatch, Kevin Borba. All right, Kevin, I last year was at some of the press conferences in the lead up to the Alamo Bowl, and I was absolutely floored by how effusive in his praise Coach Prime was of Kalani Sitake. And then shortly thereafter, Kalani Sitake essentially reciprocated and said, I love Coach Prime. And speaking of Deion Sanders, and it's kind of funny to see this, I guess I'll call it a bromance emerging between these two Big 12 coaches. They're obviously going to be foes on the field on Saturday night, but there is no love lost between these two because they actually enjoy one another, it appears.
Yeah, I would say one of the biggest surprises of the Deion Sanders tenure at Colorado that has just like caught me off guard. And I didn't expect him to like be mean to coaches or anything, but like the respect, the knowledge that he has of these other programs, because obviously he coached at Jackson State for 3 years, but so he wasn't going up against them. But he comes in and he does his research. Like he knows that BYU is a program built on culture, built on love, built on like all of this passion, like put into the field. And like he understands that, and he talked about that at the Alamo Bowl. Like you had mentioned earlier, like he just raves about Kalani Sitake and the culture he's built. He just raves about how they play. And like, it kind of shocked me to see, because I don't feel like we see that enough in college coaches, where it's like, they'll be like, yeah, Jake Hatch is a good guy. And they're like, yeah, like they have a good team. Like Deion Sanders, I feel like likes to be personable about it. And that's something that players have told me about him, is like, he shocks you with how nice he is, with how intentful he is, like intentional is, excuse me. Like he gets it. And it was a pleasant surprise to see how much he like values the traditions that other programs have.
Well, I think the thing about it is both of these guys, Kalani obviously leading a religiously minded institution's football program, obviously with BYU being run by the Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints. There's the religion element in it, and we all know that Coach Prime, he's a God-fearing man. And I think that respect also, because these are two very religious men, I think they connect on a deeper level than just the football side of things. Kalani said earlier this week, I loved watching him as a football player. And I think every one of us who got the opportunity to watch Deion Sanders, Neon Deion, prime time during the era he played in the NFL, all love him as a football player, but I already mentioned it earlier. Aaron Roderick said that he was a fan of his, obviously, as a player as well. And Aaron, as the offensive coordinator, is going up against the Colorado defense. But he talked about the fact that what he's observed since Coach Prime took over as a head coach is he says he's an old school coach. He runs a program in an old school way. And Aaron also added that during the lead up to the Alamo Bowl, he said all of our interactions with Colorado's players, and we're talking, they had the Heisman Trophy winner in Travis Hunter, you have Shedeur Sanders, they were the talk of the town down there in San Antonio. Trust me, I was there. I saw it with my very own eyes. But he said they were super respectful. And there's a lot of times at these bowl games, the two fan bases just don't get along. The teams don't get along. I think there's a lot of mutual respect between these two programs, and it starts right at the top with their two respective head coaches.
Yeah, I would say like this is how Dion opened his conference or his press conference on the day we recorded this on Tuesday. I consider, and this is about Sitake, I consider him a dear, dear friend and a God-fearing man, which I adore. He's a man of standard, a man of principle, and a darn good coach and a good dude. Like, you don't hear that sort of like camaraderie and in sports really ever, like unless it's between players like after the fact. Like it's never like, oh, we're going up against like the Celtics and the Lakers, and they're not like, hey, LeBron's a great dude. Like it's always after the fact, right? It's never during, it's never before. And I think one that shows two guys who aren't like, we always talk about this like in life where they're like have fragile egos where they're like, hey, I am man enough to admit that like I think this guy's a good guy. I think he runs a great program. And I think that's really refreshing, in an era where it seems like toxic masculinity is frequently winning.
Well, and that's the thing about this. I think that speaking of Prime, he's got a reputation, and I think it's one that people don't necessarily understand. Yeah, there's a lot of flash. There's a lot of pizzazz. There's a lot to it. But at his core, he's a football guy. And I think that coaches like Kalani Sitake or literally any other coach out there, once you kind of get past that, I guess you want to call it a facade, you can call it that. I don't necessarily consider it a facade. It's just who Deion Sanders is. Once you get past that, you understand at his core, he loves football. He loves the game, and he coaches that same way. And I think people can respect that. Yeah, he could be very full of himself. There's that very easily with all the accolades, the success he had, he could very much be full of himself. But I think he's come off as a fairly humble guy who loves the game because he doesn't have to coach. He didn't have to coach Colorado. He loves the game and he wants to give back to a game that's given him so much.
Yeah, and it's cool to see. And I think, and he did this back in his playing days. I was a little too young to watch him in his prime, but there was Deion Sanders and then there was prime time, right? Yeah. There was like two personas. And I feel like he kind of has that still in the sense where he's like Coach Prime and then Deion Sanders. So you'll see moments of prime time where he's like confident, where it's the Louis luggage thing that people love to bring up, where it's the whatever it is.
Okay, the Coach Prime thing in and of itself, I think irks a lot of people. Like the fact that Colorado refers to him as Coach Prime versus calling him Coach Sanders.
Yeah, I refer to him as both. I think when I'm talking about him as like the influence of Deion Sanders, I refer to him as Deion Sanders because I think there's a difference between like, regardless of what coach it is, outside of maybe Nick Saban, I think you could say like where there's not really a coach in college football where it's just like that dude is so cool. Like that guy is a literal legend. Like not a lot of coaches, and I don't want people to be like, oh my gosh, he's comparing him to Nick Saban. I'm not saying he's Nick Saban as a coach, but personality-wise, like fame-wise, like there's not many coaches that match that level of fame. And I think that's sort of the other persona he brings to the table, which helps build this program up.
Well, and the other thing is he could blow off coaches like Kalani Sitake. Kalani was a really good player at BYU. Trust me, he was a fullback who I wouldn't call him necessarily a star, but he was a team captain, a bedrock guy that Lavelle Edwards built some of his final few football teams around guys like him. But Kalani's NFL career got cut short by a back injury. He was with the Bengals, had a back injury, and never saw the field again. And he went into coaching. A guy like Prime could be like, yeah, that's great and all, but I'm going to go over here and talk to my guys. But to his credit, he respects anybody who's in the profession. He obviously, as I mentioned, really likes what Kalani is doing at BYU. And I think we can have mutual respect between the two fan bases because of that. So that brings us to this, Kevin. What do you expect in Saturday night as the Cougs and the Buffs square off in Folsom?
Yeah, I think it'll be a close one. I do. I do think it'll be a better game for Colorado than they had last year. But BYU is currently favored by 6.5. I think BYU wins 24. Probably 17, I would say. I think that's sort of BYU
covers then if they get the 7 points then.
Right. I think BYU's whole goal is to not allow this to be a sort of shootout because I think Colorado would want this to be a shootout or like to get BYU in a situation where their freshman quarterback is throwing the ball 40 times a game. So what do you think, Jake?
Well, and that's the thing. I'm fully expecting BYU's game plan to come in and say, all right, stop us. We're going to ground and pound you. We're going to do what essentially Georgia Tech and Houston did.
Yeah.
If you can't stop it, we'll jam it down your throat. We'll take maybe 6 possessions. We'll score at, I've got it 27-21 in favor of BYU, but it's going to be lower scoring because I think BYU is going to be methodical. They're going to be a little bit plotting. Plotting is probably the wrong term, but they're going to make sure that they take care of the football and make sure that they don't put Bear in situations that will put him at a disadvantage, if at all possible.
Yeah, if Colorado can't stop the run, it's going to be a long, long season, right? There's a lot of teams in the Big 12 that can run the ball, and until they show me that they could stop the run, I'm going to be not as confident. I do think they could win this game, though. Like, if you told me, hey, Colorado wins by like 10, 14 points, I'm like, okay, they figured out the run defense and the offense was clicking. But if you tell me like, hey, they lost by 10, it's like, okay, I'm assuming BYU is running the ball.
Yeah. BYU is fully intent on letting LJ Martin and Sione Moa run roughshod in this game. And trust me, LJ had his best game of the season when they played in the Alamo Bowl because he was finally healthy. He dealt with numerous injuries last season, and they had a full month off leading up to the Alamo Bowl game. If you want to go back and watch what he can do against Colorado, watch that game because he was really good down there in the Alamo Dome. All right, Kevin, looking forward to this one. As always, good to catch up with you, my man. Where can my Cougar fans out there catch your work if they're interested?
Yeah, over on Locked On Buffs every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, just like they are over here at Locked On Cougs. We also do this cool thing with a former Colorado player who played for Dion during his first year. We do a film breakdown every week, so it's been really fun to sort of get another opinion or view on the X's and O's. And yeah, I'm also at Athlon Sports covering all things college football.
Kevin's the man, a man of many talents and covering a lot of teams alongside it. But once again, if you're a Buffs fan that wants more BYU coverage, Locked On Cougars, just like Kevin said, available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. But as always, thank you to everybody for making these your first listen and or views of the day. And until next time, thanks for being everydayers right here on the Locked On Podcast Network.